All right, Susan, how you doing?
Great. How's it going?
Awesome, man. Everything is everything. So you already know we're gonna jump right into it. So bring you up to speed. We already know California legalized recreational marijuana a while ago, but that doesn't mean it's allowed at one of the biggest music festivals, which is the Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival. Cannabis and music of all genres go hand in hand, yet the organizers of Coachella have an anti-cannabis view. Now, historically, it hasn't been unusual for people to be arrested for possessing drugs at Coachella. Last year, 65 people were arrested for drug-related offenses during the concert's first weekend, and on the second weekend, there were 75 arrests for the same reasons. So with us today on Check This Out, we have the Weed Fairy, the first lady in pop culture who gives out weed for celebrity gift bags at Coachella and other A-list events. She's the founder of JustSayNo.org. Let's give it up for Susan, the Weed Fairy Soares. Susan.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. How did you get the name the Weed Fairy, Susan?
I didn't really, it wasn't really about me. I just had an artist friend, and I said, the first time I did Green Oasis, I said, hey, I need a poster, and it's all about giving the artists that are performing at Coachella bags of weed because Coachella is so against it. And he came up with this beautiful design that was a fairy. And after a couple of years, I don't know, I was just on the Woody show, and it just came up. I said, I'm the Weed Fairy, and they loved it, and it just became a thing.
That's awesome. I think it's kind of interesting understanding the history of just festivals overall from Woodstock to modern day, and of course, the things that have taken place, during Coachella. It's just surprising that they would take that stance, don't you think?
I really do, and that's really how it started. It's all of my friends are leaders in the cannabis industry or activists, and this was 6 years ago. And I was asking everyone, hey, what are you doing for 420? Because we all know that 420 is cannabis connoisseurs' Christmas. And everyone at the time was going to Denver to High Times. And I was like, that's really crazy. This is Southern California. This is the mecca of cannabis. Why is everyone going to Denver? And so I started looking at different events that were going on in Southern California that I could dovetail on and do an event. And I found the Coachella Festival. I'd never been, and I was like, oh, this is really cool because, everybody tries to just, at the time it was still so illegal, and they were just trying to pass it off as that's just a hip-hop thing to do. And there was such an eclectic mix of music. I was like, this is great. So I started looking at their FAQs, and one of them was, I'm a medical marijuana patient and I medicate daily. Cool? And the answer was, no, bro, your medical card is not valid here. And bro was a hyperlink to the Guerrilla Union Smokeout Festival in San Bernardino. And I was like, no way. Am I allowed to swear on this show?
Sure.
I had to ask. I was like, fuck you, Coachella.
Okay.
Fuck you. I mean, you think that if you are a medical cannabis patient, you belong in San Bernardino at this hip-hop festival and not here? Are you serious? So I was like, look, I'm going to rent an estate, and I'm going to get a bunch of people to give me a bunch of weed, and I'm going to invite all the artists that are performing to come over and get bags of weed.
Wow.
And
That's how it kicked off. So tell me, what is Just Say No about?
It's a 501c3 organization, and its mission is to create awareness of the many benefits of the cannabis plant.
Okay. Enough said. So with that understanding, Susan, why, and I still don't understand why Coachella is having such resistance to accepting cannabis on its grounds or in its element, considering it is California. Do you think about, is it the stigma of drugs and, festivals, or is it perhaps some of the negative press they may have feel like they've gotten in the past? Do you have any idea or inkling why that might be the case?
Negative press. I mean, they're so rich, they're able to keep things out of the press. Was it this year or last year? An 18-year-old girl was run over walking to her car because her car was so far away and there was no lights, and you didn't hear about that. I don't think they're afraid of negative press. I think that, I mean, it's a whole can of worms. I mean, if you go to their FAQs, even today, they have the same basic answer. They're not going to let it in, even though it's very, very legal now. But my feeling is it boils down to Philip Anschutz, who is the owner of AEG. And he's just this old dude that, has billions of dollars, and he's locked away in his mansion where everybody just kisses his ass and does what he says. And he's invested in addiction centers. So it's all about money. They want to say, okay, now we get it. So cannabis, and they say marijuana, they don't say cannabis. Cannabis is legal now. We don't think people should go to jail because of cannabis. We just think that they're addicted and they have a problem and they should come to our treatment centers.
So
yeah,
it's just
it's
interesting.
Money.
It's money. So with that being said, and you kind of speaking on the money aspect of it, Susan, do you think that is the law fair? Before cannabis was legal, people would sell it and get a smack on the wrist. Now it's a felony, and those most likely at risk are Black or Latinos.
Well,
and
wait,
why is that?
I want to stop you there. What's a felony? I mean, what are we talking about? Are we talking about giving away weed to people, or are we talking about selling it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe either or at this point.
No. What's happening is they're trying to regulate it. They're not doing a very great job of that. But I mean, now that it's legal and regulated, if you want to be in the commercial cannabis space, in order for it to work, you have to follow the rules. If you want to sell cannabis, you have to get a license to do that. And there's not even misdemeanors anymore. There's just fees, and most things like smoking in public or possession is just an infraction. It's $100 fine. There's very few things. I spent about an hour today looking for a great resource on what all of the penalties are, and really couldn't find anything. But now you've really sparked my curiosity, and I'm going to find a great resource and let your listeners have access to that. But I can't think of anything that's really a felony. It's mostly about fines. Unless you're like moving major weight and selling it, and you're going across state lines and you're doing it in a commercial way. But you can have, it depends. I mean, every law is different per local government. So your city may have a different layer on top of the state law, or if you're in an unincorporated area, your county might have a different layer on top of that. But typically, you're allowed to grow 6 plants.
All right, Susan, I heard you mentioning 6 plants. If you don't mind, you could pick up from there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you're legally allowed to grow 6 plants. And if you're really good at growing those 6 plants, you can get a pound. I mean, if you're amazing, you can get a couple of pounds per plant, And this year so far, I've had 4 harvests with my 6 plants because I can grow outdoors in Long Beach and harvest 4 tons. That is a lot of cannabis. And I am legally allowed to give away an ounce of cannabis to a friend of mine or somebody that needs it. I can give it to Weed for Warriors a day. I can give away an ounce a day per person. So I can share. I can take that cannabis and I can turn it into edibles. I can turn it into concentrates, and I can have as much of the concentrates that I produced from the cannabis that I grew at my home. I can have as much. I could, if I'd never smoked it, I could, foreseeably have like 100 pounds of cannabis at my house, and it would be legal because I grew it there. You know what I mean? But I can't take that 100 pounds in my trunk and drive it somewhere and have a party.
Okay.
I
So
can
you're
take 1 ounce. I can have 1 ounce on me.
essentially, Susan, you're the fairy weed godmother, and you're educating us. Okay. So I know some of my questions might
All
sound
of those
like,
things.
yeah, you're all of the above. I know I sound like a real a novice that knows like nothing. It's just interesting to hear you speak. You're very passionate about it, obviously. Tell us this, Susan. What's the Green Oasis?
The Green Oasis is the event that I started when I saw that FAQ on Coachella's website. So the first year, as soon as they announced the lineup, I rented a house. And as soon as they announced the lineup, sorry, I'm smoking weed. It's making me
Hello.
Hello. I'm testing something for the Emerald Cup.
Absolutely.
Yeah, lucky. Yeah, it's a tough job.
Yeah, Susan, I got you.
What was I saying? No. Anyway, so as soon as the lineup was announced, I started calling all of the managers of all of the bands that were performing. And I don't know if you are really aware of this, but there's like almost 200 bands that perform at Coachella.
Wow.
There's a lot.
Mm.
So all of them were like, this was 5 years ago, remember? They were like, we don't really want our artists to be looked at like they're potheads or stoners. So, thanks, but no thanks. I did have Alabama Shakes, who made the cover of Billboard magazine as the cool kids of Coachella that year. They came straight from the main stage to my Green Oasis, and Brittany Howard was freaking out when I got her a doctor's recommendation. She was like, oh my God, can't believe this. And I gave her so much weed. And, but most of the managers were like, don't like it, don't want it. And then the next year they were like, well, it sounds kind of interesting, but, you can't take pictures of our artists. So no pictures. And then the next year they were like, hey, that sounds pretty cool. We're going to let them come over. And then this year they were like, the artists, when they got over, they're like, how do I get into the business? What do I do? They have all these questions, I made a lot of commissions this year connecting artists with different products that needed partners. And so next year, I'm going to have not only gift the artists with weed products, but also with the knowledge, the education, and the experts, the founders and the CEOs, that are doing interesting things in the space.
Very interesting. It's funny, Susan, I would imagine that Coachella's had some of the biggest artists in the game who are very well-known cannabis users. And it just seems a little odd, but it seems like they're very much trying to protect this image, so to speak, from the rest of the world.
It's so odd that one of there was a April Fool's campaign last year that a judge had decided to allow cannabis into Coachella. It just isn't true. It's just so strange. It's like this just doesn't make any sense. How do I wrap my head around this? Because if you read the FAQs on the Coachella website, they don't say anything about any other drugs. Like, why do you
cannabis?
Hate cannabis so much? Why cannabis?
Especially in California, of all places. We're in California, from all accounts, whether you consider it official or unofficial, just kind of leads the world, in my opinion, when it comes to just the association with cannabis. So I find that to be quite interesting. Hold on 1 second, would you, Susan?
Yep.
Now, Susan, I wanted to ask you, do you think that the dispensary game in California is racist?
I think Coachella is. I think AEG is racist. I don't think the dispensary game is racist. I think that while I was not a